To the point that they are working hard to spread it into China.
Okay, now we're at 5 years later, 1966, somewhere in that time period. China is in the height of the Cultural Revolution. Mao they thrown the red guard, and you're speaking before 2 million people with Mao Zedong. We have a picture with you and Mao Zedong. Y'all couldn't have been no more than 10 feet apart, and you're speaking, and look like Mao, a little short fellow with the bald head and the Mao Zedong jacket on, is intent on what you're saying. Can you just tell us what this speech was about that you were given on the cover of the Liberator magazine?
Well, this was Chinese National Day, and they invited me to speak, and I was explaining to them that what a great honor this was for me to be able to speak there, because I was the grandson of a slave, and in my country that my forefathers had been slaves, and that I would never be accorded this type of a reception in my own country. And also I went into the suffering of the black people in the United States, and also of thanking Mao Zedong for the statement he made condemning racial discrimination and calling on the peoples of the world to support us in our struggle against racial discrimination.
Okay, how did you, what caused you to go from Cuba to China?
Well, the first thing, I had differences with old Cuban communists. Fidel Castro was a personal friend, and if it hadn't been for him, I probably wouldn't have survived in Cuba, because I was not a communist. And as a result, I was a nationalist. And the communists, who had many of them were white Americans who were there, supposed to be technicians, and they were telling the Cubans that I was sent there to stir up racial problems, and they were condemning me. And then the Russians started to condemn me in their publications and started condemning Mr. Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, and started to condemn me, though I was living in a communist, so-called communist country.
Wait a minute, the old-style communists linked you up with Honorable Elijah Muhammad and Malcolm X, painted you in a nationalist bag, and there was a problem with that?
But they didn't call it nationalist. They called it black fascism. Said that we were black fascists. And so...
We need another whole show to get in what that means philosophically of how old-style Cuban communists and Russian, their cousins...
And American communists.
And American communists can call the black nationalist movement black fascists. We only have about 4 minutes left, but I got to get into one thing. In our pre-interview, we were discussing how that organizations such as Republic of New Africa were infiltrated, and the Nation of Islam, because we got the big controversy around the Malcolm X movie. But you said from your international perspective, you could identify how some of the tendencies and flavors of how infiltrators work in nationalistic struggles.
Yes, abroad I saw some who were caught, and I knew how they worked and what kinds of things they did. Now, that doesn't mean that specific people here, but Republic of New Africa was all over the nation, was spread across the nation. And every organization in this country in the 60s had been infiltrated.
Republic of New Africa, Black Panther Party, we saw a lot of that.
Yeah, CIA and the FBI. But I knew them, and this was one reason that they wanted to isolate me from the community, because they knew that I could spot one in a minute, because I had spotted them abroad. In fact, that's the way the Cubans said they used to catch them. Because, said, Williams, you just go on and live your life like you're supposed to. Don't worry about anything, and we'll watch those who circulate around you. And that way we'll know who's who and how to pick them off.
Okay, we want to say that people got to come hear you live to get how you can spot them. We just wanted to get the flavor that you could spot them. Now, we have a couple of minutes left. On February 20th, you spoke before the Malcolm X Community Center on a program. Can you tell us some of the kind of things, an overview of what you said in this appearance in the city of Detroit?
Yeah, well, when I speak, I like to give a lot of time also to questions, and I like to have exchanges with the audience, because that way we learn from each other. But we discussed the situation now and the situation as it was in the past, and what we did and what we encountered and what must be done now. We've got a lot of self-hatred that we've got to overcome, and I discussed that, and the fact that we've got to care for each other. If we don't care for ourselves, that we're lost. Now, a lot of people want to exonerate the white racists on the basis, oh, that if you got suffering now, it's your own fault, because those things have changed. It's not like they used to be. This is not true. See, we've been conditioned to hate ourselves. We've been conditioned to kill each other. And we've been conditioned to brutalize each other. And this is coming out. And this is not something that just grew up in us all of a sudden. This is a thing that's been put in us, just like Pavlov trained his dog. And we've been trained to react this way. And it most certainly is a fault. Now, it is our responsibility to overcome this. But we can't exonerate the white man for what he's done. This has been the most brutal form of slavery in the whole world. And the most brutal form of racism and the violence, all kinds of violence. And in the schools and everywhere, we have been conditioned. And we can't exonerate him. But what we can say is that we are not going to remain the same type of people that he designed us to be.
This is Project Bait. We've been discussing with author, community activist, professor, resident of the state of Michigan now. We've been discussing with Brother Robert Williams. We talked about the 1960s, some of the 1970s. In this particular interview, he just gave us a little bit on how to identify infiltrators in some of our revolutionary nationalist organizations. We'd like to thank Brother Robert Williams and also thank the Malcolm X Community Center for making this interview, these two interviews possible. Thank you, brother.
Thank you.